Today I'm going to demonstrate for you how to apply a nail wrap. You can do this over a natural nail or an already applied and blended tip. We're going to do it on an already applied and blended tip. So follow your procedures for your tip blending. I believe it's 27-1, but this is where we're going to start at 27-2 is going to be our nail wrap application. So once you have already removed your existing polish, clean your nail, pushed back your eponychium, remove your cuticle, you will put your tip on after you've done all your tip steps, and then we're going to actually get into the application of the wrap. So review 27-1 if you need to, otherwise we're starting at this point. So we're going to cut the fabric to fit the nail that we're using. So you can use the pre-cut fabric, or you can buy them in a sheet where you can cut them to the width you need them. These are nice a lot of times because they're already curved, so it'll fit on the natural nail pretty nicely because our shape of our eponychium is normally curved. So you just kind of measure it up and decide to trim off any extra. So we can go ahead and trim off the sides we don't need because it's a little wider than we need it. So just make sure when you measure, it's going to go from sidewall to sidewall with no overhang. We want it to be a little shy of the actual nail because we have to seal it in around the edges. Because if the fabric overhangs, you'll get raveling, and that'll cause for your enhancement to break down. So we definitely need it to be narrow, but not too wide or too narrow, just a margin around it, okay? So once we've gotten our tip cut, our wrap decided on the tip size we need, then we're going to actually put on our wrap resin. So remember, the nail has been dehydrated, it's been prepared, our tip's been prepared and everything. So now we're no shine and no moisture. So we're ready for our wrap resin. So we're going to put a coat of wrap resin off, not touching the skin, over the entire nail, including our new tip we just added, because we're sealing in, we're making our nail longer. So we definitely want to make sure it's going to stay longer for a minute. So once that wrap resin is on, we're going to give it a moment, and now we're going to peel off our fabric. So using gloves and or tweezers, I did not grab my tweezers, but as long as you don't touch it to your natural oils of your finger. You do not want to touch it to the natural oils because that'll cause your wrap to bubble. So you definitely want to make sure it's covered from the cuticle area down, and we'll just rub it in to make sure it's on there good. Get it all sealed in. If you have a piece of plastic, you can also use a piece of plastic, like a piece of plastic bag or some Saran wrap, and press that down as well. But normally if you have on gloves, it does pretty good. You just don't want to touch it with any oils. So once you've put the wrap on, you're going to make sure that you trim the fabric if you need to off the tip. Sometimes you can file it off if the glue's dried all the way, but we'll just trim the excess off to get it out of our way. And now we're going to go back over it with another coat of resin. So we're going to seal in that fabric we just put on. And this is a long nail, so sometimes the client's nails aren't this long. So we just want to make sure we get it all sealed in. That's why we cut it a little shorter, to get those sides and right up against that cuticle area. All right. So this is where we're going to come in with our wrap resin. With your client's finger pointed down, because you don't want to get it on their skin, you want to make sure that you spray. You do 2 sprays. Let that dry. That's going to activate the glue and help the resin dry a lot faster. The gel resin that we're using to put on the wrap with. So we're going to let that dry just a second. And once we feel like it's dry, it doesn't take very long because the wrap resin normally dries it pretty quickly. And now we're going to go over it with a second coat to just really get that good and sealed in. All along those edges and up around that cuticle area. Again, hold it down, spray it, let that dry just a moment. Okay. So once that's dry, what I'm going to do is file this resin or this wrap off this tip, because I'm going to make sure that when I put my last coat on, it's going to seal in that fabric, because this is dry at this point, but that fabric was overhanging my tip. All right, so now we're going to apply our last coat of wrap resin to make sure it's good and sealed in. And this, now I'll go along these edges where I had that fabric and seal all those edges in real good, because that can cause your fabric to peel if you don't. This service is normally something that we don't do here in 2021, but we can use wraps also to repair a cracked nail or give strength to a natural nail. So we can definitely use it in this day and time. So this is how we would do it with our resin, our nail resin, gel resin. So this is how we traditionally do this service. Okay. So once we feel like that is dry, it takes about 2 to 3 minutes. We're going to shape up our free edge once again. Get it good and pretty. Okay, make sure that's dry. I felt like it would, and it was making me nervous. Okay. So we can actually just lightly buff over it at this point, because if you use too high of an abrasive over this gel resin and the fabric, it's going to buff off what you just put on. So we want to use a higher grit. So you could use a 240 nail file or just lightly buff over it to remove any high spots. There's normally not any if you've applied your tip properly and blended it, and if your wrap is smooth when you apply it, your fabric, you don't really get any high spots too bad. So that's pretty smooth. So at this point, you could polish it, or if your client liked a natural look, you could just put clear. As long as we get it all buffed. Get that tip real good and get it all buffed up. All right. So you can dust it off with your manicure brush. And as you can see, hopefully you can see, it's not too bright. Let's get that up a little bit. You can tell that we have a nice smooth surface for polish. And that is how you apply a wrap, using your brush on gel resin and your resin activator spray.